Hi everyone, it's Hyunji-A here, once again bringing you a fresh episode of Stand Out New Talks. Today we have a very special guest, and as you can see from the title of the video, it is Jamie Stevens. Yes, the Jamie Stevens. I think the name itself is pretty self-explanatory. He's an artist that I respect very much and has been around the scene for a very long time. And if you're not too familiar with his music, he has released on some prominent labels such as Bedrock, Sudbeat, Lost and Found, and these are just a few of many other great labels that he's released his music on. I also had the honor to have my track, Journey of Life, remixed by him, so it's a very special interview, I have to say. So I'll keep the intro short for now because I'm sure you're just as excited to hear the rest of the podcast. So here's Jamie Stevens. I can't seem to see you though.
Okay. Video, maybe that one?
Ah, yay! Ah!
Okay. Yeah. There we go.
Wow, well, good morning, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, morning it is. Yeah. My coffee. Yeah.
Here it's
What
like
time's over there? It's like late afternoon there, yeah?
yeah, it's like 5:30 in the evening.
Yeah.
It started snowing today, so
Oh, nice.
yeah, because it's winter here.
Yeah, no, we don't get snow here in Melbourne, so.
You don't get snow, right?
No.
No.
Further out, like if you go further north, like a couple of hours north, there's snow
Right.
fields, but in the city, no.
No.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much like summer over there right now, is it?
Spring, yeah, end of spring, getting into summer.
Oh, okay.
So, but it's been really, really wet. Like it's been like so much rain, and it's like it gets down to like 15 degrees or something, and then it goes up to 30 degrees and back down to 15. It's
wow.
It's all a bit chaotic at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, I
Good old
didn't know
Melbourne.
that Australia was had a rainy season.
Well, we don't. I
Oh.
think it's the El Nino. I
Oh,
think.
okay.
Yeah. So it's every, I think the last time was like about 10 years ago. Something to do with the ocean temperatures, and we just happen to have this huge surge of wet weather coming for us for the next couple of months.
Oh.
So, but yeah, I mean, you get wet seasons up further north of like tropical areas, like around like Queensland. So you got Cairns and Northern Territory up there. They get wet seasons. Yeah, it's very tropical.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
Anyway, about the weather.
it's always a good way to start a conversation, I guess.
How's the weather?
Well, thank you very much for your time to do this podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose to start off the podcast, I just wanted to talk about your Infusion project that you did. I know that you did it in the early 2000s, and I know that maybe for some of your younger fans or like younger
Who weren't even
generations,
born yet. Yeah.
I was in the early 2000s. I was maybe like between 5 years old and like 10, so
Thanks.
so and nowadays I'm sure you have a lot of fans around my age and my generation listening to your music.
Probably at least 2, yeah.
And so I was just wondering if you wanted to just talk about your earlier projects with Infusion for those who are not familiar with it, like such as myself. I wasn't so much.
Yeah. Well, we actually started in 94. So we started in the mid 90s there. I grew up in a town that wasn't really, I don't know, I wasn't really invested in electronic music at all. It wasn't like, it was quite a rock kind of city. And I had a best friend, Manuel, who I went to school with, and he and I used to get together after school and have sleepovers, kind of making music on a little Porter Sound and a 4-track recorder, and we used to make demos and stuff. That was like in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. And then it's a long story, but anyway, so I ended up meeting someone else when I was going to university, and found out he's from Wollongong as well, and he had some equipment, and I invited him to come over my house and have a bit of a jam. And we jammed on, like, I had this little hardware sequencer. I had 2 of those called an Alesis MMT8. And you put in like MIDI sequences, and they put them on like mute and unmutes on these pads. And so you would just turn on and off these MIDI tracks, and so you could jam with those. And found out the Orbital actually use those live as well. And so we were I just put in loops and just jamming around. It was no samplers or anything. It was just a couple of Juno 106s, 101, and stuff like this. And we jammed for about 3 hours. And when we stopped, thought, wow, this is a really cool idea that we could actually do this live. That'd be a fun project. So I called up my friend Manuel and said, look, this guy Ben's come over, and we had a jam session. You should join us, because Manuel's very musically proficient. He went through all the levels of music. I just never taught music. So he brought a great kind of musicality to our music, and we played live. And and our first gig was the Wollongong University Band Competition, and that was a few weeks after we actually started, and we just jammed, and we didn't get a place. We almost kind of got disqualified because we had no musicians. We had no drummer, we had no guitarist, so therefore we were in a band. So we didn't get a spot. That's okay. And then we started playing different raves, and just the whole point was just jamming and just making stuff up on the spot, based on stuff, loops and stuff that we prepared before. And then Manny started singing more, and then another guy joined, Frank, who was friend of a friend from Wollongong. Very boring, but we just kind of grew from there. And then at a rave that we played at, there was this guy Pee Wee Ferris, who was a DJ, whose brother John worked at Sony, and he heard us play and said, "This is one track that you played. I really want to record that." So we went to Pee Wee's studio, recorded that, gave it to his brother John at Sony. He said, "Yeah, we'll release it." So we had a release on Sony, two singles on Sony. And then we started releasing stuff on Thunk Recordings, which is this underground label that kind of happened from Sydney in the late 90s. That's where our music started getting played by like Sasha and Digweed and Pete Tong and Paul Oakenfold and stuff like that. And then, and this is a really long history here. I don't know how excited. And then Adam Freeland came over to Australia, and this is kind of the big sort of turning point for us was him coming to Australia and asking us to produce his album. And we all had day jobs, and we had just gotten management at that point, and it gave us the impetus. Well, it gave Frank and I the impetus to quit our jobs and do this for 6 months. And then at the end of that, let's just see what happens. So we did that, and Adam saw us play live, went back to England, and he was a resident at Fabric in London. And he convinced the guys at Fabric to book us to play live. So we played for free, and we booked all these other gigs around the world, just either for nothing or very, very cheaply, just to show people what we did. And all went really well. And this is like 2001. So from 2001, that's when we started playing live internationally, playing all the different festivals and clubs around the place, and all kind of took off from there. So the kind of the big, I guess the the height of what we did was probably like 2001 to maybe 2007, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go.
Would you say that with Infusion, it was how your music career began? Really?
Yeah. I mean, I was very young when we started, so yeah, definitely. I didn't really. I had released a couple of really small things a couple of years before on vinyl, but yeah, it wasn't really a career thing at all. It sort of became a focal point as far as a career goes when we quit our jobs. When Adam came to Australia, that's when we went, okay, well, see what happens. I can always go back to selling CDs and books if it doesn't work out. So yeah, that was the impetus, really. Yeah.
Okay. And
but I've been making music way before. Like, it was just
okay.
Yeah, I made music like since I was a kid.
What kind of music were you making?
Bad.
I
I think yeah, in retrospect, yeah. I mean, it's very naive kind of music. It was all made on a Commodore 64, using tracker programs and stuff like that, and sort of all being inspired a lot by computer game music at that time. So I used to love computer game music. I love this. So I used to make up songs and put them onto cassettes. Like, all the music would come out of the TV, out of the TV, which had a speaker on the side. So I used to get the tape recorder and record the music there, make up compilations of computer game music. Such a nerd. So I was doing that since I was probably, I don't know, what would it be, like maybe nine or 10, I'd say. Yeah.
And has it always been has it always been electronic music, or?
Yeah, it was electronic music. That electronic music and classical music was kind of the first music that I really kind of connected to. Is the with classical music, it was music with no words for me. So for me, I was massive Star Wars fan. So for me, the soundtrack was everything to me. So I really connected to the drama of the music. And electronic music for me had a similar kind of thing where there was no spoken narrative to follow. It was just the emotional undercurrent of the music. And so classical music and my sister's, my sister used to love new wave music. I used to love the 12 inches, the remixes with fewer words and weirder sounds. That always kind of my ear would go, what is that? Yeah, at home I'd be on the piano. My sister used to learn piano. I never did, but I used to sit on the piano and play the really low notes and listen to the harmonics of the notes and use the sustain pedal. And so for me, it's all about sound. It's always about sound and how tones could be emotionally valuable, I think. So it was always that. And then it's kind of the kind of pop music I started getting into, the time that I started getting connected to music with words was like, I guess it was like Depeche Mode and New Order and The Cure. I used to be pretty obsessed with them, and then Pet Shop Boys and all kinds of stuff like that, really. And then that kind of opened the doors up to acid house music and all the rest, really. Yeah.
Do you think that after all those years of experimenting with and also discovering new sounds, do you think that you've mastered the art of creating new sounds or manipulating sounds into ways that you want to produce them?
Oh, look, I would never say I've mastered it, because you're always learning. Like, I'm always finding new ways of doing it. And if there's a particular way that I've explored, particular technique I've explored to try and get a sound, once I kind of found a way to do that, I'm like looking for something else to kind of, bring something new to the table. I'm also like absolute perfectionist much to my detriment. Like it had previously stopped me from actually ever releasing any music. I was always like, oh no, gotta make it better. So over the years, I've gotten better at that. But I could never be satisfied with like 100% go, yeah, that's 100% it. Okay, done now. I think anyone who makes any art, if they feel like, okay, I've done it now, like, then they're not properly really kind of thinking about their art, because you're always finding new ways of expressing yourself, finding new ways of getting thoughts out through whatever medium you're using. So no, I'm always finding new ways, which is one of the reasons I actually started getting into modular music, because it opens up all those different possibilities, just patching this into this and kind of finding, exploring. I think this thing, it's particular sound. It's not really about mastering, it's about the exploration of it and what you can do with this. A lot of it's happy accidents, really. Learning the basics is one thing, but then so taking that and kind of pushing things further and further, but it's also kind of connecting dots with different inspiration as well. Like, obviously I think we're all big consumers of all kinds of music, so kind of connecting the different inspiration to kind of make your own sound. And I think that's an infinite exploration there. To say, for example, my love of classical with, I love like traditional African music. So hey, what could I do? What could I do to kind of bring these things together and put my own little stamp on it and give myself a little project to kind of try little things out there. You spend a whole lifetime doing this. So no, I never feel like I've mastered anything in that respect.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now that you mentioned about your modular synth, me, I've only just been producing for the past 2-ish years, so I'm still very new to producing, and especially when it comes to hardware such as modular synthesizers, I have absolutely no idea how they function, or what exactly I'm supposed to tweak, or how I'm supposed to put those wires together. Do you have any
If you
tips?
find out, you let me know.
Oh, I was just gonna.
Yeah, just like on. Yeah.
No, sorry. I was just gonna ask. For someone like me who has no idea of how or where to start with those, do you have any tips or tricks?
Well, yeah. Look, for me, I could make sense of some of it because of my first introduction to synthesizers was analog synthesis. So I didn't go into digital, like in the box synthesizers. So I had an SH101 was my first synth. So learning the basics of, okay, well, that's the oscillator, that goes into the filter, that goes into the amplifier. So I knew the terminology there. But with those synths, it's the signal flow is hardwired, whereas modular, you can go, okay, well, I'm going to go from there to here. I'm going to use that to control that instead. And, so a lot of it's modulation. A lot of it's, getting things to modulate other things that you probably wouldn't normally think of. So if you're getting into it, you probably do the thing, or sort of get the things that are the most basic fundamentals. So you get an oscillator, you'd get an amplifier, you'd get a filter, and maybe an envelope generator. What the hardest thing for me to get my head around, I think, was that you need a VCA, you need an amplifier for almost everything. Like I thought, I'll just use my envelope generator, the attack, decay, sustain, release. I'll put that onto the gate. And so the gate, I could kind of control the amplitude of, but no, it's not. You have to put the output into the amplifier and then control that amplifier with an envelope. You tell the amplifier to kind of turn up and down. And so there's a lot of things to kind of get your head around. And I guess if you're going to get into it, start really, really simply, and kind of just experiment with your oscillator and your amplifier and a filter maybe. Because even within simple modules, there's still so much you can do. And then you start getting into more complicated modulators, like a maths or any kind of LFO, like being able to kind of take your modulation and be able to apply it to almost any kind of parameter is pretty amazing. I mean, you can do a lot of this stuff on in the box synths. You can go, okay, well, you can use those modulation matrix synth parts. But for me, it's more about being able to being tactile and just sitting there and going and doing multiple things at once and going, okay, that into that. It's different from getting a mouse and going, okay, that.
Yeah.
That for me was, because I've been obviously originally hardware synths and then going in the box in the early 2000s and then going, I'm missing actually doing stuff. Particularly the more esoteric sound design, the kind of the weirder stuff that, I love doing like chains of different effects and kind of just coming up with something new, and I still do that, but just putting stuff out, and particularly with like step sequencing and, doing a step sequence with knobs, like going, okay, that, and kind of just randomly coming up with stuff quickly. It's the speed at which you can kind of come up with something really kind of unique and manipulate kind of just weird modulations and having the timing of modulation or kind of doing weird kind of polyrhythmic stuff. So yeah, it was just like another thing I could add to the music I made and make it, to continue the fun of that exploration.
Do you use it for most of your productions?
I probably used it twice. No, I'm joking.
Okay.
Yeah, no. These days, yeah. There's usually at least a few elements. What I tend to do is I'll jam with it. I'll send a clock out from Ableton and I'll clock into this, and I've got a couple other things you probably can't see in the picture, but I'll run a sequence and I'll have this triggering a number of different things, and I'll obviously manipulate it as I go, and I'll record like about 10 minutes or so of it, and then I'll probably use that as the basis for the arrangement. So for me, it was a different way of thinking about how I construct a track. But other times I might just find a little bit and I go, oh yeah, that almost like a half a bar there. I'm going to use that as a bass line. Or I'll then, once it's in Ableton, I'll pitch it around, stretch it out, do stuff like that. So most of the time, like this stuff will be in there in some capacity.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of sounds do you normally make with your modular synth there?
What I do love making, I like making really kind of plucky kind of sounds. Like the Elements is really great at that, and I've got Elements and the Rings, and they're really kind of known for this kind of a physical modeling kind of thing. It's called carpless string. So it mimics the sound of plucked instruments, but they're great for bass lines as well. All kinds of things, really. Then I got the Braids, which is a great oscillator. You've got all different oscillators in there. You've got like 100 different oscillators, so lots of different tones in there. So I'll either kind of create really plucky sequences, or I put it through my clouds, this Mutable Instruments clouds. I've got a couple of those, and I make soundscapes out of those. So really kind of granular reverbed soundscapes. Sometimes I've got a Tutoring machine which does a randomized sequence, and I'll put that through what's called. So when you have sequences like a Tutoring machine or something like this, it's not note quantized. It's just a variable voltage that will play those notes. So it's not to a particular, it's not the 12 note scale. So you have to put that through a scale module, and you tell it what notes to kind of go once the voltage comes in, to kind of push it up or down to get to a particular note. So I'll kind of have a Turing machine going through that, select the notes I want it to play, and maybe so I do a lot of ambient soundscape stuff as well. And sometimes I'll use that. I've got lots of ambient stuff that I have never released, which I'm thinking about doing like a mini album of sort of ambient soundscape stuff. Or I might use those as a bed for a track, to background to it or something like that. So all kinds of stuff really. And sometimes I'll make really percussive stuff by putting it through distortion, and then all kinds of bits and pieces really. That's the beauty of it.
That's so
and other times I'll because I've got a multiple output audio interface, so sometimes I'll take sounds out of Ableton and then into here, and then process them through here, and I'll put them through different filters. And because what I love about the LFO is having these kind of polyrhythms. That's one of the big reasons I wanted to get into the modular thing, was getting lots of different LFOs all to triggering each other in weird times. So I'll get audio out from there, put them through my clouds, and kind of I've got, it goes into here on my mixer, and I've got a couple of analog delay units and stuff like that. So I'll dub stuff out and record it back into Ableton. So stuff like that.
That's so cool. I feel like I was just getting like a quick 5-minute lesson on modular synths
without really saying much at all.
Speaking of which, I remember seeing a post that Sudbeat made on Instagram, doing a Q&A from you, and I was going through the questions that some people asked. Sorry?
On
Sudbeat.
Sudbeat one, yeah.
And the comments, they asked people if they have any questions for Jamie Stevens, and I went through them because I was so curious to know what people would ask and what you would respond to. And I think one of the comments, you mentioned that you give lessons or classes.
Yeah.
And how does that work? How do I sign up for those?
So usually what happens is I find out what the person wants out of sessions. Like, one of the reasons I started doing it is because I did some tutoring through a school that's no longer around anymore, and I found that the level of ability really varied, even though there were questions asked, where do you feel you're at? Even within that, like, I'd be talking about something and some people are like, yeah, of course. And some people are like, what are you talking about? So I found it was hard to differentiate for each student. So I thought, really learning this kind of stuff really makes more sense one-on-one. And I kind of realized there's a lot of knowledge I've kind of acquired over the years that, and a lot of people have asked me about different techniques. So I thought I'll just do it one-on-one. So I ask what that person is after, where they feel they're at. And then the projects will get sent to me, and then we go online and we do something like this, and I'll go through the project and have a listen, and we'll go through different techniques to kind of improve or think of different ways of doing something. It goes from like sound design to arranging to mixing, and everything kind of in between, really. I don't really have too many students at the moment. So last year was crazy. It was like really busy. But yeah, I usually have like a few students at a time, I think. So every week I feel like probably a few students a week.
Okay.
So yeah, send me an email.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. So usually what we do is like do like in 5-session lots. I find, so there's like an hour and a half. So when you do online sessions, you do an hour and a half, and we usually do like 5 sessions. I think that's kind of a good a good time, a good amount of time to kind of go through things thoroughly, to kind of explore enough to warrant doing it. You got once, I mean, if you've got one project, I do like one project kind of sessions where they say, look, I've got this one track and I'm finding it really, really hard to kind of gel these things together, or I just need a better sound for this. And so I run through kind of different things they can do. But generally, if you're trying to learn something, I'll try kind of do maybe 5 sessions.
Mm. I just wanted to go back to your music productions, how you produce. How specifically do you pay attention to the details? Like, for example, do you pay attention to, let's say you're making a melody or chords or bass, do you pay attention to the waveform of each element to see how well they mesh together or how well they like combine together? Like, down to the little nitty-gritty, details of each element.
So I've gotten better at letting things go in the early part of the process. I've gotten better at going, okay, just get the general feel down. So I'll start recording once I get like get an idea of where this may go, and it might change direction, but working relatively quickly, I think for me is something that's really improved my work. I used to get very, very detail orientated really early on. Being a perfectionist, I'm like, that kick's not quite right. Sit there for like 2 days. Okay, kick's right. What was I doing again? So yeah. So early on, I try to get the kind of the raw idea down, or at least follow that idea. Like it is exploratory. So in my technique's pretty exploratory. So I may wait for things to emerge as you're working, and not getting so bogged down in detail is really, really important. Then I'll go back and then work on those fine details, and I get very detail orientated when it gets to the final kind of part. But I find it's kind of hard because the sound design is very much a part of the process. It's very much part of the sound of the track, really. I guess I'm lucky in that, because I've been doing it for a long time, a lot of the sound design comes very kind of as second nature to me. I don't have to overthink something. So I'm lucky that the process becomes quite it sort of flows for me. Like I know what to reach for, and I can get into quite a zone, and that's the kind of the stage you really want to get to, is where you're not really thinking about what it is you're doing. You're kind of acting by instinct, and those are the tracks that really feel the most natural. Because and that's one thing to really be said about really kind of getting to know your instruments. So you're not really thinking, okay, how do I've got this thing in my head, maybe a bit more like this. But if it's not to say you don't experiment. I mean, you do experiment a lot, but you kind of, you know what the functions are, you know where you're going with it, but you're just kind of going with the flow. So yeah, it's that you're kind of getting to a point where you got the sound close, but you try not to get too bogged down. I mean, I'll do general things like, okay, well, I can hear some rumble there, so I'll cut out some of that, the low end, or that's getting a bit loud, so I'll do some small bits and pieces. But at the same time, there's other times where I will, like, my session will be about, okay, I'm going to design sounds now. I'll start designing a sound, and my idea will be just to spend the day making noises for other projects. But then I'll go down a rabbit hole with a particular sound. I'll end up creating a whole track because I was inspired at that point. But when it comes to the mixing, yeah, I do get pretty focused on getting things just right, but not to a point where I'm kind of sucking the life out of it too, because that can be really, really easily done, and it can sound really shiny and new, but
Mm-hmm.
you kind of lost some of the vibe there. So I like to think I've gotten better at trying to capture the feel of the original idea, but making it sound solid, really. Because it's the thing about this kind of music. It's so easy just to keep going and going and going, and then where do you stop? It's very different from days of having just MIDI in a 24 channel desk in a studio, and it's like that. Okay, after your session's done, that's it. You have to get it finished. So it's a double-edged sword, really, because I like going back to old projects and kind of rediscovering parts and working on it until it feels right, but it can also really slow you down and feel like nothing's ever finished.
Mm-hmm.
So
at what point do you tell yourself, okay, this is enough work on this track?
When the label says, come on, do it now. Look, I think, well, there's definitely that, which is why I like remixes. I really like remixes for that reason. Well, one of the reasons I like doing remixes, because you have a deadline. I think maybe just when it feels like, for me, my gauge, when it feels natural, when it feels like the track's kind of talking to me, and it's like it's coming across well. For me, a lot of the process is pulling stuff back. Like I've kind of added different layers and done some exploratory sound design, and then I started going, okay, things are getting a bit lost here. So I'll start reducing elements. I'll start pulling stuff back, and that is when I kind of feel like a track's really kind of breathing nicely. But what I also love about that process is that because you're adding all these layers, I like kind of taking this last layer and that middle layer and go, oh, they really work well, but you wouldn't have gotten to those layers unless you did all these other parts, that informed all those other parts. So you start kind of going, oh, okay, well, that's an interesting kind of collision of these kind of elements. So, that I look for the uniqueness there, looking to having parts that really kind of speak to me, that really kind of have something special, and go, okay, well, that's really special. So I'll remove all those other parts that weren't really necessary. And when it feels like there's a uniqueness to it, it's either unique or really tells a strong story. I think that's when it really kind of feels like it's complete, when it's reasonably kind of clear about what the track's about, I think. Sometimes it never gets to that point, but that's what you're going to aim for.
Oh, that's cool. No, I did notice that you make a lot of remixes, and so
probably too many.
And are you generally not so picky with which tracks you choose to remix or not?
No, I'm joking. No. I am extremely picky.
Okay.
Actually. I am. I probably wasn't maybe 10 years ago. Just because I love the process of remixing. I love taking sounds that I didn't come up with, and kind of retuning them and doing stuff to these sounds. It's like getting a whole different set of colors to play with for me. So that was what I loved about remixing. But what I came to realize is if you're not really sure what you're going to do with it, chances are you're probably not going to find something that's worthwhile doing with the remix. So now I'll listen to a track and go, yep, I can hear something in here. And it can be either like an obvious thing, like I can hear the whole track here, but I just feel like it just needs, a different groove here, or there's this great element in there. I could do something with that one element. So it's got to be something that stands out to me. Otherwise, I know they'll be sitting there for weeks going, oh, no, this is not working. So it's a waste of the label's time. It's a waste of my time. And that's not to say because the track's bad at all, ever. it's just like I don't know what I'd do with this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll turn stuff down and go, like, I'm sorry, I really wouldn't know what to do with it. Whereas like your track, I heard straight away. I heard this kind of early 90s, progressive house thing in there. It's like, oh my God, that'd be so much fun to really kind of push that sound. So I knew straight away that I could do something with that. So, but for you, as a choice between the two tracks on that EP, like, I actually wanted to do both, but it's like, I don't have enough time to do it. But but it was a strong feeling of I know what to do with this. So those are the ones I'll take. But overall, the remix process is really, really good fun. I really, really enjoyed that. I guess for me, it's because you're using other people's sound. Sometimes I'll have quite a diverse range of releases because I go, oh yeah, this is really great. I could imagine like a real lo-fi kind of dark house track, and I got, oh, that'd be great. It's this big euphoric kind of. It's like these things that as one artist probably doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I want to kind of explore all those different things because they're sounds that I don't have myself. So yeah.
No, I find it really cool that you also have a wide variety of styles, like in productions. Even I was really surprised actually when I heard one of your songs from Infusion. It was like an alternative rock song. I think it's called Try It On, right?
Try It On. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Alternate rock. Okay.
No, but it's not electronic music, no?
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a lot of samples and because you got the guitar as well.
Okay.
So that's from the last album we did, and by that stage we had done so many clubs and done lots of club remixes and DJ friendly tracks, and in particular the other guys, Manny and Frank, they just wanted to, and myself included, just wanted to explore with, let's make proper songs. Like it's, rather than just a track based out of a groove and just jamming, I guess it was the foil to all that of just being in a club or a festival and just jamming free form. Let's try and kind of construct a song. So it was just a natural progression of just trying something new, because we hadn't really, we'd experimented a little bit with that with previous albums, but it was always kind of based on pretty much the fundamental or the grounding of a sort of club mentality. But that last album, there was a big breakaway into actual songs, because when we were listening to, we do listen to a lot of rock music, alternative music, and God, I was, it's probably around that time of the album, I was like massively into Arcade Fire and a lot of bands like that where the energy of that music, the big layered vocals and stuff that you can't really kind of do in club music, and because we're just big lovers of music, it's like, let's just do it, and an album's a place to do that. So that's what we experimented with, really.
That's cool.
So I love a huge range of music, and I guess the key or the trick is to try and channel it into a way that is your own, really. I think there's certain sounds it's difficult to kind of have them merge into your own productions, but I think there's a lot you can take away from other kind of genres of music and learn from, and channel into your productions. I think that's half the fun, really.
What was your role in the band for Infusion?
I was a sound tech. No.
Oh my God.
No. So we kind of had pretty broad roles because, well, Frank and I at that time, we were probably the most technically proficient on a computer and synths. And Manny tended to be the writing songs, and we take his songs and then kind of turn them into kind of club tracks, or kind of basically kind of in a way. But then we'd, a lot of the ways we'd work he'd come in with some music, and then I'd kind of go, okay, well, maybe we try this kind of bass line with it. And then Frank would go, okay, well, maybe try these harmonies with it. Then let's pull all this stuff out and let's be left with these elements. And so it was a very much a tag team effort with production. So that's in the studio, we all sort of took turns in how we kind of constructed a piece of music. Live, Manny was on keyboard and singing. Frank was on an MPC 4000 with the looping elements, and so just kind of he'll be arranging live. And then all those, we had 8 channels out of that, plus my drum machine and another synth into a 24 channel desk, and I'll be mixing that live with other elements to kind of do transitions and stuff like that. So that's how we jammed live. But yeah, I don't know, it was kind of, I guess my stuff was more mix downs and when it came to the remixes, I'd be doing a lot of the remix work. In general though, I mean, that everything was pretty fluid, really. We all kind of had a hand in everything, so except I never sang. I can't sing. So
what's your experience with playing live in a band versus, let's say, solo in a club with just CDJs, for example?
Yeah, look, playing live is so exhilarating. It's really, really amazing when you know that if you just press play, whatever loops on is just going to continue ad infinitum. So you have to do something. So when we were playing, each gig was dependent on the crowd, really. It was very, very much a two-way street as far as how a set developed. We never had, well, I say we never. When we had, there would kind of point to the end of our Infusion lives where we had a guitarist, we had additional guitarist and drummer, and where we had to have set lists for them to know what to do, because when we were just jamming, we just freeformed. Whereas when you had people playing instruments, they needed to know kind of what to do. But before that, with just the 3 of us, we didn't have set lists. We didn't know what track we were going to start with. We'd go on stage and what are you starting with? I don't know. I'll just press play and just go with it. So it was exciting, playing live there, and just the kind of the small cues you'd pick up on as you kind of look at each other. I'd see Manny about to kind of do something on the keyboard, so I know to adjust something here. I can see Frank about to do something there. So you're kind of just looking for these cues just to jam, and almost in the same way as jazz musicians would be looking at each other. Yeah. So in a similar kind of way, the excitement of creating something, and you get this kind of this synergy where when it goes well, that's never going to happen again. So there's this real kind of excitement there, knowing that that's a one-off. It's always a one-off, but when you have this kind of moment, you go, wow, I don't know how we got to this point, there'd be a synergy of parts where we look at each other, just keep going. This is good. So it's different because you're very much in that particular moment. You're right there in the moment. Whereas when you're DJing, and because you're in control of so many elements, you're watching everything every second. Whereas when you're DJing, you're thinking a few steps ahead. You're thinking, okay, well, I want to get to this point. You're kind of watching the crowd. You're thinking ahead a bit. You're not as you don't have much control over the sound. You got your EQ and stuff, but you don't go, okay, well, okay, when you're playing live, you go, okay, you know what, you need to kind of pick it up a little bit. I'll add a ride over that, add a open a hi-hat over this, and you don't really have that luxury when you're DJing.
Yeah.
So you kind of think, okay, what kind of track can I use to kind of bring the crowd up, or we need to bring it down, how I'm going to do that. So it's a different thought process. Yeah, so excitement factor, yeah, you can't really beat playing live. But DJing brings its own strengths, being able to kind of do long form sets and build an atmosphere like that is pretty amazing. And it's not as nerve-wracking as having 24 channels of audio going, oh God. That's the thing, like the mix always kind of varied. You're not in a studio, it's like you can turn your kick up and down. If your kick's like a couple of dB out, sounds okay on the stage, but you're not sure what it sounds like out in the crowd. It's very raw. It's really raw, which is why I never liked our sets being recorded, because it sounds good in the moment, but you listen back to it, you go, oh God, oh, that white noise was way too much. But at the time, it was great, So there's a raw energy to jamming, which you don't really get with DJing.
Have you ever had things or equipment just like failing in the middle of the show?
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of things. So with the MPC, that was the hub of everything. So that would have like about, I don't know, like 100 tracks for us to choose from at any one time. This is back in the day before you had fast hard drives. So to load that thing up would take about 15 minutes to load. So if the power went out, you'd sit there for like 15 minutes while the thing loaded. That happened a couple of times. Like someone's like pulled the cord out or something. Going, oh God. So it's a restart. That was kind of the major catastrophe, because if that goes down, then you basically have nothing. The number of times you got off a plane and got to sound check, and the things like, the covers come off, the bolts come out, and the great thing about Frank is he's an electrical engineer. Mm-hmm. So he would open the thing up, solder stuff back in again before the set. Yeah. So we were very lucky with that. The number of gigs we wouldn't have been able to do, without him being there. Well, at the same time though, if we didn't have him being able to do that, we probably would have hired a lot more gear, and knowing that we can get away with broken gear. So, and then other times, a couple of times where I used to get very animated on stage. I really, really get physically into the music. I can't help it. I get really excited. And so my mixing desk would be on a stand, and a couple of times I'd be, and the whole thing goes, oh no. Chords come out. It's okay. Pick it up, put it back on the stage, plug everything back in again. Okay, keep going. And the other guys go, oh God. Calm down. Yeah.
You got a little too excited there.
Yeah. But yeah, that they're kind of the only things that really happen. So, that's a good thing about. Well, I guess a good thing about not having a computer. Like the hardware was pretty solid. The hardware is really solid. Like you wouldn't get through. We'd never had a set where going through the set, suddenly the MPC stopped working. Like you wouldn't get that. They're solid.
Yeah.
Whereas laptops, the heat can get to them. Things like that can happen. So yeah. So we're quite lucky that we were kind of hardware based, I think. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question about one of your tracks. I was really curious to know. Your track "Wonder of You." I know it was like a huge hit and success, and I can see why, but it's just like the way the song is just, there's something very unique and nostalgic about the sound. And I was curious to know how you created that song?
It is interesting, that one, because one night I came up with this. I was doing this like little plucky progression. I love pluck sounds, in case you didn't know. This really kind of plucky progression. I was doing like one line at a time. So instead of doing as chords, I was doing one line and then another line, and then kind of creating these kind of interesting, what I thought was interesting kind of harmonics there. There was like that kind of thing. So I was doing, so I made that, and it was in a 12-bar pattern, and so okay, there's something there. I like this. So I went to bed and put my iPod on, listened to some music, and I could hear this beautiful guitar piece. Oh, it's really, really nice. Okay. The next day I went to the studio and thought, I wonder if I could take elements of this, put it over the top. It's in the same key. And I couldn't believe that I kind of connected the two together. And so I basically just chopped up these guitar parts to kind of follow that progression. And that was the melody. And then I sort of doubled that with synth sounds that go over that. And the thing kind of grew really quickly. Like as far as the arrangement went, it was, the hard part was getting it to sound right. So I had so many different versions, and I played a version out each weekend to kind of hear if it worked properly. And it was just getting the right tone, right? Getting the drums to kind of work. I think early versions had quite housey kind of drums that didn't really work. And so I kind of try to make it a little bit more organic, a little bit more disco. Like you said, like nostalgic kind of feel. So I put in my little Jean-Michel kind of synth parts to try, which I'm in love with. I love those sort of sounds. So there's a lot of those over my music. So yeah, it took a while to kind of get the tone right. The music happened very, very early on, but the tone took a while. But yeah, and I sat on it for like 2 years or something. I didn't do anything with it. It's like, I don't know who'd like it. I don't know. And I was in touch with Mitch at Microcastle, and he said, yeah, I love it. I'll take it. And at the time, I was thinking, I was thinking about Lost and Found, and I think that had just started, and I like IJ. I thought, oh no, it's not really anything he'd play. Really, it's kind of a unique kind of track. Really, it didn't really kind of fit into a particular genre, at least to my ears. Which I always do that. I always go, oh, no one's gonna like it. It's not this, it's not that. So I don't give it to anyone. As it turns out, Guy loved it. I'm like, oh, I'll probably send it to him. But Mitch was amazing at supporting a lot of my music around that time. So I'm glad I put it out on Microcastle. He's a great guy.
Yeah, no, I think it was very suiting to put it on Microcastle. Yeah.
It worked well.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you some rapid fire questions now.
Okay. Start the clock.
Yes. So in production, what is one piece of equipment or plugin that you just cannot live without?
Oh my God. Can't live without. Oh my God. So rapid. I don't know. One thing I couldn't live without.
Or like you must use it for every single production.
Yeah, right. Every single production. I think every single production, not in the early stages, but in the latter stages, my Magic AB plugin from Plugin Alliance. It's a reference plugin where I can put in all the different reference tracks, get them all level matched, and you can look at the stereo image, the loudness levels, and compare. I always use that to get my mix right. I use that every single production.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I highly recommend it. It's amazing.
Yeah. I used to do something similar to that, but I don't think I kind of stopped doing it. I don't know why, but I think I
Yeah.
should get back into it.
I just find that it kind of gives me a real world perspective, because if you find that when you're in the zone and you're working, your ears can play tricks on you,
Yeah.
and you think, yeah, like it's so energetic, and you put on another track and you go, whoa, I either have no top end in my
Yeah.
music because my ears have been fatigued,
Yeah.
or the mid range is super loud. Usually, I find everything's like too dull in my tracks until I go to mix it, and then I kind of bring those out more later. But yeah, that the real world perspective, I think, is really kind of important for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. Who or what is your biggest influence? It could be either musically or in life.
His influence. Like ongoing, or just in general. I think I don't think I would be making electronic music if it wasn't for Jean-Michel.
Okay.
I think listening to his albums, Oxygen and Equinox, when I was a kid, I think that really, really gave me not the impetus, but the desire to create worlds of electronic sound, not just like little computer generated music. It was that expansive, cinematic, real sort of emotional electronic music. So I think he was probably the biggest reason why I started making, getting deeply into electronic music.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the best piece of advice that you could give to someone who's just starting to produce or want to get into live performing?
Okay, well, production, take your time. Like, don't feel you need to finish a track and get it out. Take your time learning and finish tracks. Don't leave like tracks as loops. Set goals to, because each piece of music you make is going to be a learning experience, and there's a lot of things you can only learn through the process of making an entire piece of music. Doesn't have to be complicated at all. Like, you can make a whole track of just drums to learn how to program drums. So make a whole track out of it. It can be like 4 minutes long or something, but give it a contour, give it structure. Learn how to structure music, and just take your time with learning your tools, because there's so much value in learning your tools inside out, so they become second nature, so that when you're feeling that you want to kind of explore something, you know exactly where to go. So I think if you're starting to release music in your early stages, you're still learning, it's not your best foot forward, really. So yeah, look, I think it'd be rare for someone to kind of start making music and within a year, like within 12 months, go, okay, I have a totally finished product. There are geniuses out there. I'm sure that does happen. But I think it's really important to really, really take your time to learn your music inside out. But also, don't be disheartened that your music doesn't sound like music that's out there. It'll take time. I know a lot of students of mine who are just starting out get really dismayed at how simple their music sounds. I want to make it sound like this. It's as my wife would say, scaffolding learning. She's a teacher, so teaching kids, the learning process is scaffolding. You start here and you build on that, and then you build upon that, and you build upon that. So it's the same thing. You can't get up here unless you kind of start down here. So don't get too disheartened. But also just enjoy the process. You might not be, again, think something else you'd say, like the mindset thing of, you're not there, but you're not there yet. So it's all about not yet. You will get there, just not yet.
Yeah. it's important to have some patience too.
Totally. It is very, very much about patience.
Yeah.
And just absorb information. Like when I started, obviously there was no internet. Obviously there were still books, like it wasn't that long ago. But so I'd be reading magazines and there'd be terminology in there. I don't know what they're talking about, but I was so obsessed with electronic music that I just thought, I'm going to stick with it. I'll keep reading about this stuff, reading about the DX7 when you don't have a DX7 and trying to learn what FM synthesis is on paper, looking at these diagrams going, what? but having an SH101 of like one of the most simple synths you can get. Like I actually sat on my desk in my bedroom when I first got my SH101. I sat there with headphones, and it's a monophonic subtractive synthesizer. And I sat there just learning what each fader did and learning how one responds to the other or how that influences the other was really invaluable, because I could take these little things and go, okay, that terminology, that looks like what they're talking about here, but in a different way. And so joining those dots. So I guess my point is that I was reading this stuff that a lot of it was very foreign to me, but I just wanted to keep learning. So I keep reading, and then slowly the pieces started kind of, falling into place. And this is before I had, you had YouTube videos that you could watch, and, so just absorb as much as you can. Don't feel too overwhelmed. Just start as simply as you can. If there's something you don't understand, doesn't matter. Just keep going. Just keep going. It will make sense. But it's really important, I think, to really, really learn the absolute basics of sound. I think it's really important to understand what waveforms are, how sound moves through the air, frequencies, and all this kind of stuff. I think that's really important to even at a basic level, like a really, really basic level. Like you don't have to go too far into that in the early stages. I think it's really important later on when you want to kind of get better. But the fundamentals, I think it's important. And then just experiment and see what happens, and just kind of just absorb information as you go. Yeah.
That's some really solid advice. Last question, I suppose. What is your most memorable experience while you were touring or DJing?
That's dangerous. Some crazy times. No, like I know I've said this before in other interviews, but I really. Oh, actually, you know what? There's actually one. Okay, well, I say the one that I've always said is the one in Creamfields in Argentina. That was just insane. Because we played between the Prodigy and Paul Oakenfold in Buenos Aires, and that was crazy. Like just being in front of that many people, like God, it was like, I don't know, 40 or 60,000 or something. It was insane, like really, really, really insane, like a sea of people. Yeah. So that was, an obvious highlight. But the other one was the first time we played overseas was at Fabric. So we were really stupidly lucky to play at such an amazing venue. But as we were playing, there was this one guy standing in the middle of the crowd just going, and it was really unnerving. We were playing like, problem. Like, I'm a people pleaser. Like, I'm like, you're supposed to be having fun. Come on. It's like, oh, what are we doing wrong? Like, let's make it better for him. So we're playing, and he just didn't move. He just stood there, just watching us. Like, I was like, oh my God, he's so not impressed. Like, okay, just forget it. Anyway, so we finished and went upstairs to the mezzanine area where the bar was. And he came up to me and he said, my God, that was amazing. I've never seen anything like that. I'm like, oh. So I thought you hated it. He goes, no, I couldn't move. I was mesmerized. I'm like, oh my God. So,
That's funny.
So
You were
never
just
assume.
yeah. You got to a point where you were so impressed you couldn't move.
You couldn't move.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess this concludes this podcast, this interview. I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your stories and your experiences and your advices. And also thank you for having done the remix. That was truly an honor.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you for asking me to have a chat. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I guess we'll keep in touch, and I'll be reaching out about your your lessons.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully soon.
Definitely do that. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy
Have a
your
good
night.
day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Come on now. Recording now. Is it me or the quality of my webcam seems shit?